9 spine-chilling 7-Eleven encounters. Terrifying tales of cursed night shadows exposed. Sarah had always thought the most unsettling sounds at the 7-Eleven would be the chime of the doorbell or the hum of fluorescent lights. But as the clock struck midnight, an eerie chill settled over the store. She was restocking snacks, the flickering neon sign casting ghostly shadows on the shelves. Then she heard it, the whisper. It slipped through the aisles like a breeze, barely audible yet undeniable. Sarah, the voice dropped her heart. Panic surged, her hands numb as she fumbled a bag of chips. Glancing around, she found the store empty. She was alone, or was she? As she shook off the unsettling feeling, another shadow moved at the edge of her vision. She turned, staring hard into the dimly lit corner where the energy drinks stood. An inexplicable sense of dread blossomed. Figures appeared past the closing hour, cloaked in darkness, their faces shrouded in the void. It was then she realized they weren't just customers, they were something far worse. Her spine tingled, stomach knotted. It's just paranoia, she muttered to herself. But the whispers grew louder, now harmonizing with the rattle of the drink cooler, the walls of the store closing in like a vice. Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. With a quick breath to inhale courage, Sarah pressed on. Each late-night visit from her neighbor, Eric, unraveled threads of anxiety. He walked with an odd familiarity, and each time he flashed that affable smile, the flickering lights above seemed to dim. They were neighbors, sure, but the way he fixated on Jake sent a quiver down her spine. Their conversations were casual, yet beneath the surface lurked a darkness she couldn't quite articulate. The tension escalated that night when she caught Eric with an unusual look in his eyes, like he was trying to see behind her mask of motherhood. Standing at the register, she could feel something crawling up her throat as he leaned closer. "How's Jake?" he whispered, his voice low and sinister. Chills prickled her skin. She felt the shadow behind her as the store emptied, an ominous pressure that felt alive. It wasn't just her imagination anymore. Reality was blurring, and she was taking a step deeper into horror. As she locked eyes with Eric, shadows danced and lengths of darkness unfurled behind him. Was there a connection between Eric and the whispered tales of children gone missing, rumors circulating like ash in the air? What she had brushed off as insane folklore now loomed larger than life. She had to act. Suddenly, the whispers morphed into screams that resonated through the store, piercing the quiet night, chilling every bone in her body. Each tick of the clock felt like a countdown as Sarah braced herself. Tonight, she'd confront him. Fear twisted her insides while the sounds of horror swirled around, distorting her world. As she clutched the counter, she knew she wasn't just fighting for herself anymore. The question remained: what evil lay waiting in the suburbs' shadows, and could she save Jake before the darkness closed in? Sarah's heart raced as Eric's gaze lingered, his smile freezing into a sinister mask. She fought against the fear clawing at her throat, pulling the courage together for her son. "What do you want?" she demanded, her voice steadier than she felt. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting an eerie glow. She could feel the weight of those unseen eyes in the dark corners, watching them. Eric stepped closer, invading her space, his breath cold against her skin. "Just checking in," he said softly, a mocking sweetness lacing his tone. "It's past his bedtime, isn't it?" A wave of nausea crashed over her. If he really was harmless, why did she feel like she stood on the edge of a precipice? "I don't need your help, Eric," she shot back, her words sharp like the edges of broken glass. "Leave us alone." But Eric simply chuckled, low and conspiratorial. With every laugh, the shadows behind him seemed to lean in menacingly. "Oh, Sarah. You misunderstand. I'm only looking out for you and Jake. We wouldn't want anything to happen to him, would we? The darkness that encroached made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Memories of whispered warnings flooded her mind, tales from parents she had dismissed, all cautioning about someone in the neighborhood, tales that now echoed like sirens in her head. Had she ignored the signs, mistaking them for nonsense? The store felt like it was closing in around her. Shadows flitted beyond the orange glow of the overhead lights, flickering in and out, as if they were alive. With each passing second, anxiety mounted. She could hear her breath quicken, matching the relentless ticking of the clock on the wall. The door to the stockroom creaked softly, drawing her attention. A fleeting thought crossed her mind: what if Jake had wandered back there? Stop! She blurted out suddenly, pointing toward the stockroom. Get away from me! Eric's expression darkened, and the air thickened. He leaned back slightly, a disarming grin forming as he raised his hands in mock surrender. All right, I'll go. But remember, Sarah, I'll always be watching. A shiver ran through her spine as he turned, melting into the darkness. Her heart dropped. Was he truly leaving? Or was he gathering more darkness to unleash on her? With trembling fingers, she reached for her phone, practically willing it to light up. Before she could dial, a loud crash echoed from the stockroom, startling her. The shelves rattled, and the lights flickered ominously. Jake! She yelled, her voice high-pitched with panic, rushing toward the sound. Every instinct screamed at her to run, yet she pushed through terror, drawing closer to the stockroom door. As she reached for the handle, a whisper swept through the air once more, chilling her to the bone. Mama! The voice was Jake's, but it carried an echo, warped and twisted in a way that sent icy tendrils creeping down her spine. She hesitated, doubt mingling with her desperate need to protect her son. What was behind that door? What unseen force lay in the dark? Stay away from him! She shouted, pulling the door open with a jolt, feeling breathless and frayed. The dim interior revealed a shocking sight that made her blood run cold. Jake stood there, surrounded by an otherworldly glow, a shadowy figure looming behind him. Mom? He asked, his voice trembling, eyes wide with fear. Sarah could hardly breathe as the shadows around them writhed and swirled. There was something dark and ancient within those depths, something that wanted Jake, and she could feel its hunger. Before she could react, the shadows coalesced, lunging toward them. What was she supposed to do? Could she fight the darkness that threatened to snatch her child away? As her mind raced, she realized a new terror. This was only the beginning. The store wouldn't let them go easily. What sinister force had Eric awakened in the quiet corners of suburbia? The shadows writhed, twisting into jagged forms, reaching out for Jake with a hunger that sent waves of panic crashing over Sarah. Her instincts kicked into high gear, but as she stepped forward, a cold weight wrapped around her legs, like chains pulling her into the depths. No! She screamed, her voice breaking, desperation clawing at her throat. Jake's expression shifted. Confusion morphed into sheer terror as the shadow behind him expanded, tendrils slithering down toward his small frame. Mom, I'm scared. He cried out, taking a step back, but it was too late. The darkness was already moving, surrounding him like a predator closing in on its prey. Jake, move! She shouted, lunging toward him. The shadows flickered violently, hissing as if in response to her fear. She was almost there when a strong, icy gust erupted from the darkness, knocking her off her feet. Sarah hit the ground hard, the cold tile biting into her skin. Breathless, she glanced back at her son. The glow surrounding him pulsed, brighter now, contrasting ominously with the swirling void behind him. Jake, please! I'm coming! Panic ignited her limbs, forcing her to scramble to her feet, heart pounding. Stay away, Mom! He pleaded, his voice shaky. It told me not to move. The shadow's voice echoed in her mind, a cacophony of whispers layered together, each more chilling than the last. Each whispered chant felt like needles pricking at her sanity, trying to worm their way into her mind. She shook her head, desperately trying to drown out the noise. They had to get out, or they would be consumed if not by the shadows, then by the fear spreading like poison. Jake, listen to me. You have to go. She didn't know where she'd lead him, but it had to be away from the shadows. She crawled closer, the darkness reaching out like icy fingers, almost tangible, grazing along her arms, trying to pull her back. In a rush of adrenaline, she glanced at the door, her escape route. If only she could get to him before it was too late. She focused all her strength on him, the bond of mother and son, something powerful that would cut through the chaos. We need to go. Now. Suddenly, an inhuman growl erupted from the darkness, shaking the very air around them. The shadows coiled like a serpent, preparing to strike. Sarah lunged forward again, her arms outstretched toward Jake, beckoning him with an urgency that overcame her fear. Grab my hand. She yelled, her fingers desperately reaching. Just as Jake hesitated, the dark figure behind him lunged, swallowing the space between them. For a terrifying moment, Sarah thought she'd lost him. A strange warping light erupted from Jake, as bravery surged through him. He reached back, his small hand clamping around hers, and together they pulled away from the darkness. A blinding flash erupted, illuminating the stockroom, pushing the shadows back momentarily, but as quickly as it came, the light faded. Sarah felt her heart drop to her stomach. Go. Now. She yanked him with all her might toward the door, but the shadows surged again, relentless and hungry. They were close to freedom, but darkness clawed around her legs, a last-ditch effort to claim them. With one last surge of will, she forced herself forward, pulling Jake behind her. Then the door swung open, revealing the store's main aisle. The flickering lights felt like a beacon. However, in that moment of false hope, a heavy silence fell, and the frigid air turned thick like molasses, seeping into her bones. Jake lowered his voice, filled with fear. Mom, what if it comes for us again? Terror washed over her, the deep realization settling in once more. As much as they fought, there was no escaping the darkness that had latched onto their lives, and the true horror was just beginning to unfold. Don't look back, Jake, she whispered, urging him forward as they sprinted into the unknown, leaving behind the smothering shadows, but the weight behind them grew heavier, a reminder that they were not yet free. A haunting echo of Eric's laughter trailed in the air, reminding her that the nightmare was still lingering somewhere close. Just as they reached the front of the store, the lights flickered again, plunging them into darkness as the door slammed shut behind them. What awaited them in the unknown night? Would they truly escape, or was this just another layer of the trap? The icy grip of fear clung tightly to Sarah as she and Jake dashed into the main aisle. A thick darkness enveloped them, swallowing the remnants of light. The flickering bulbs overhead buzzed chaotically as if warning them of the peril lurking just beyond the edges of vision. Mom, I can't see. Jake's voice trembled, his small frame almost lost in the shadows clinging to the walls. Panic surged through her again, and she reached for him, feeling the warmth of his hand in the void. Let us keep moving. She urged, her heart pounding in her chest as they wove through the aisles. The store was a labyrinth of horror, a place of comfort turned into a trap. She had always found solace in this 7-Eleven, but now it felt like a dark, twisted maze filled with unseen horrors. Each step echoed in her ears, the sound amplified in the thick silence, but soon an unsettling noise began to stir from the depths, the whispering shadows, crawling closer, hungry for warmth, for life. She could hear them now, almost mocking. Leave him, just leave him. Mom. Jake whimpered, his voice quaking. What's happening? Just hold on to me. We're almost there. She focused on the exit, a distant pinprick of light shimmering like a mirage. But as they rushed toward it, tendrils of darkness lashed out, striking the floor and walls as if enraged by their defiance. They stumbled through the snack aisle, ducking under a rickety shelf as a wave of darkness crashed against it, sending bags of chips tumbling. Sarah could hear the crunching sound of the plastic, and her fear escalated. How could they fight something they couldn't even see? Just ahead, the doors. They were almost there. "Jake, we need to run," she breathed, a terrifying urgency in her voice. She felt the chill creeping around her ankles as if the shadows were tightening their grip, reluctant to let them escape. With a sudden surge of adrenaline, Sarah propelled herself forward, dragging Jake with her. The exit loomed closer. But then the darkness surged with an unnatural fury, and a frigid wind barreled down the aisle, nearly knocking them off balance. The laughter a sound that twisted deep inside her. It echoed again, spinning around her like a cyclone. "You can't escape, you can't escape. Mom, please," Jake cried, pulling back. The fear in his eyes tore at her, a mirror of her own terror. She could almost feel the shadows breathing, insatiable, growing more ferocious with every desperate heartbeat. They were close enough to touch. Sarah clenched her teeth, flicking her gaze behind her. The shadows writhed and pulsed, swirling darkly around the shelves like an ominous storm. "Hold on tight," she screamed, almost losing her grip on Jake's hand as she hurled towards the door. Suddenly, an enormous shadow exploded from the side, colliding with them. The impact felt unreal, sending them crashing to the floor. "Mom!" Jake shrieked, his voice slicing through her panic. The world twisted around her. She rolled, shielding Jake as they both cried out wrenching, guttural screams of terror. They landed amidst the snack wrappers and scattered sodas, disoriented. Sarah felt the crushing realization settling in. They weren't free yet. With all her strength, she pushed herself upright, eyes darting to the swirling shadows that now loomed over them, gnashing with hunger. They had to fight, they had to survive. But how? "Get up, Jake. We need to get to that door," she urged, pulling him up. She could see the exit again, the promise of safety, but it was shadowed by doubt and fear. As they edged toward freedom, a glint of silver caught her eye, a sliver of hope amidst the darkness, a small broken bottle, glistening weakly. Maybe there was a way to fight back, but would it be enough? Just as they bolted forward, a hand extended from the shadows, clawing at Jake's ankle. The grip tightened, the door felt impossibly far, and the darkness was not finished with them yet. How long could they hold on? The night still held its secrets, and the real terror was about to begin. Would they face their fate or fight against the inevitable? The grip around Jake's ankle felt like ice. Sarah spun around, her heart racing, fighting the urge to scream. She caught sight of the clawing hand, a skeletal shape, dark as the abyss, everything about it raw and nightmarish. With a hoarse scream, she lunged forward, adrenaline giving her the strength to tug Jake away. "Run!" she shouted, pulling him closer. The shadows clutched at their heels, whispering vile things through a chorus of hissing breaths. "You can't run from us." They dashed again toward the flickering light ahead, but every footfall was weighed down by fear. The store transformed around them, all stretching impossibly, as if the exit were mocking their desperate race. Sarah glanced back and saw them, a tide of darkness, twisting and writhing, hungry eyes gleaming from its depths. "Mom!" Jake whimpered, his wide, terrified eyes searching for comfort in her stare. "Just a little further. We're almost there," Sarah pleaded, though her own resolve was crumbling under the pressure of horror. They passed shelf after shelf, the products shifting, the laid-back snacks morphing into demonic faces leering and laughing at their plight. A sudden crash echoed behind them. A heavy object fell to the ground, the sound reverberating in the unsettling silence, followed by whispers that sounded too close. "You can't escape, you belong to us now." Desperate, she pulled Jake with her, refusing to look back, focusing only on the exit. The door was almost within reach, but reality twisted again. A cold breeze swept through the store, extinguishing lights and plunging them into a deeper void. "Mom!" Jake screamed as they staggered into a shadow, nearly losing their footing. The world around them swirled, the familiar layout now completely alien. The door remained a cruel illusion, ever so distant. "Keep moving," she shouted, forcing both of them back on course. With renewed focus, ahead lay an emergency exit sign glowing faintly, a beacon in the madness. But just as she dared to hope, a shriek reverberated through the aisles, piercing through the thick darkness. It sounded like the very fabric of nightmares unraveling. There! Jake pointed weakly, his voice barely above a whisper, now filled with despair. A mass of shadow loomed ahead of them, a monstrosity made of twisted darkness, pulsating with an almost sentient will. It reached toward them, elongated fingers stretching impossibly through the aisles. Jake! Panic gripped Sarah as she lunged forward, aiming for the glowing sign. Trust me! She screamed, adrenaline coursing through her veins. With each step, the shadows seemed to tighten like serpents around them, pulling at their limbs, draining their will to escape. Fear spiked as she could feel the cold tendrils brush against her skin, digital whispers scraping her sanity. Come to us, we will keep you safe. No! She shouted, shaking her head furiously. We will not stay. The resolve was weak, but she needed to sound strong for Jake. She couldn't let despair creep into her son's heart. Then another crash. The shelves around them groaned, bending as if the darkness itself had decided to strike. Cans and boxes exploded, creating a frenzied cacophony that only amplified the dread. Mom! Jake cried, his small voice breaking through the chaos. What is that? Before Sarah could answer, the monstrous shadow lurched towards them. Time slowed. The door was just yards away, and the shadow was closing in, an overwhelming force suffocating them. Gritting her teeth, she yanked Jake toward the exit, adrenaline coursing through every nerve in her body. The exit sign flickered like an impending pulse, begging them to take the final leap. She could hear the whispers growing stronger, the laughter swelling like a wave ready to crash. You will never leave. The world around them erupted into chaos as Sarah propelled them forward. The exit was finally here. But was it truly an escape? Or just another layer of horror waiting to reveal itself? Just as they reached the door, it slammed shut, a thick wall of darkness blocking their way. And then the whispering returned, more ominous, more seductive. You're not ready for the light. You belong to us. In that moment, Sarah's heart dropped. A terrifying choice lay ahead, and time was running out. Would they break through, or would the shadows swallow them entirely? The darkness pulsed in rhythm with Sarah's racing heart. She stood dazed, desperate to comprehend the scene unfolding before her. The unyielding darkness pressed against her, clammy, suffocating, permeated by the whispers that twisted and turned, weaving a web of despair. All fading hope clung to a fragile thread as Jake clutched her, eyes wide in terror. Mom, we can't stay here. They're everywhere. His voice caught on the edges of panic. The shadows danced around them, swirling and rippling like a sinister tide. Sarah felt an icy grip on her chest, squeezing tighter. She knew she had to act, but the shadows felt alive, as if they were aware of her fears and were feeding off them, growing stronger with each passing second. Jake, listen to me. She urged. Focus on my voice. We can find a way out. We have to. But as she spoke, the flickering emergency exit sign above them wavered, the friendly glow turning ominous, flickering dangerously like an uncertain heartbeat. A chill swept through Sarah, and she felt the fog of despair creeping in, settling heavy in the confines of her mind. Suddenly, the shadows shifted, revealing faint, grotesque shapes, lost souls twisted in eternal torment, their contorted faces screaming soundlessly. Sarah staggered back, her breath hitching in her throat. Was this what awaited them if they succumbed to the darkness? No. We won't end up like that. She screamed, shaking her head. We are not yours. With newfound resolve, Sarah grabbed Jake's hand tighter, feeling the warmth of his little palm against her own cold, clammy fingers. They formed a small bulwark against the relentless tide, pushing against the shadow's advance. The store began to tremble around them. Shelves fell as reality bent and twisted, distorting into a nightmare landscape. Sarah willed herself to move, urging Jake forward. The way forward was swirling with flickers of light and shadow, a chaotic dance of danger. They pressed on, hoping the exit might be a genuine refuge. A guttural growl erupted from the mass of darkness, reverberating through the aisles, an animalistic challenge, a promise of doom. "Mom!" Jake faltered, looking up at her, tears mingling with the fear on his face. "What if it gets us? That won't happen." "I won't let it," she lied, trying to reassure them both. Then, with a sudden lurch, shadows formed a barrier, a thick wall of darkness towering before them, pulsating with an oppressive energy. They were trapped. "Your fear feeds us all, hope is lost," the voices taunted, slithering into her mind. Reality was unraveling in a way that made her question everything she understood. "Hold on!" she cried, lunging forward, desperate to break through. A surge of adrenaline flooded her as she pushed against the wall of darkness. The shadows writhed, shrieking, recoiling from her raw defiance. "Mom!" Jake shouted, his voice breaking as the shadows flickered dangerously close. She could feel them creeping beneath her skin, trying to burrow deep into her thoughts. "Stay with me, Jake. Do not look away." Clenching her jaw, Sarah turned to face the growing monstrosity. Its form twisted, straining for substance, and she saw countless eyes staring into her, hungry and longing. Was there a shred of truth in their whispers? "No. You don't control me," she yelled into the void. In this desperate moment, she felt something shift. The mesmerizing glow of the emergency exit sign flared momentarily between bursts of darkness. It shuddered as if alive, as if sensing the clash between their stubborn hope and the malevolence surrounding them. "Mom, it's too strong!" Jake cried, panic vibrating through his small body. With one last push, she hurled herself toward the dark barrier, thrusting Jake ahead. The shadows recoiled slightly, but it was not enough. Would their hope be extinguished, or would this frantic leap chase away the darkness? And in that raw moment of tension, Sarah thought of the Shadow's sinister claim. Were they truly lost? Or did they still have a chance to fight back? The darkness pulled at her as she reached for the last thread of light. Hearing the whispers growing louder, more insistent, tormenting their resolve. Just as she felt the pulse of the barrier beneath her fingertips, it rippled violently. "Your fate is sealed." A crashing crescendo of fear loomed as the shadows surged forward, ready to consume everything in their path. Would they break through the darkness, or would they be swallowed by it entirely? The heartbeat of terror quickened as they plunged into uncertainty. The world around Sarah twisted like a nightmare, spiraling into chaos. She felt herself falling into the abyss, the shadows clawing at her sanity, trying to pull her beneath their murky surface. Heart racing, she yanked Jake closer, feeling the warmth of his small hand slipping against hers, making her grip tighten. "Keep your eyes on me," she shouted, her voice a thread against the encroaching dread. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of despair that threatened to drown out her thoughts. It was as if the darkness sought not just to swallow them whole, but to erase their very existence. The wall vibrated violently, each pulse echoing in her bones. A grotesque face emerged from the shifting shadows, a mimicry of despair etched with hollow eyes, its mouth twisted into a cruel semblance of a grin. Sarah's stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. The creature's gaze locked onto hers, deep, endless voids promising only anguish. "Fight back, Mom," Jake whimpered, his voice barely a whisper. The terror in his eyes mirrored her own. If she fell apart now, there would be nothing to anchor them against the abyss. "Jake, hold on to me," she breathed, her mind racing, grasping for a plan. "We need to trust the light. It's our only chance." The emergency exit sign flickered overhead, momentarily chopping through the darkness. An electric pulse surged through Sarah as she noticed a barely visible path emerging, a flickering trail of light laced within the shadows. It beckoned like a distant promise. "Come on," she yelled, pulling Jake forward with renewed determination. They rushed toward the sign, dodging the gnarled fingers of the shadows reaching out hungrily. The air thickened, each step a battle against an unseen force trying to drag them back. Fear twisted her insides as she glanced back. The grotesque creature loomed behind, its mouth widening an invitation to despair. The flickers of light danced ahead, swirling in chaotic patterns but always remaining just out of reach. It was almost cruel, a mirage of safety teasing them as the oppressive weight of darkness clawed at their heels. Faster! Sarah urged, feeling the shadows swirl tighter. Closer! She could feel them latching onto her skin, cold and sharp, like icy tendrils of despair winding around her heart. Mom! I'm scared. Jake stumbled, his voice fractured, filled with panic as he clawed to keep up. I know. But we can't look back, she shouted, pressing forward. Jake's breaths came in quickening gasps, tugging at the precarious thread of hope that seemed to be slipping away like sand through her fingers. Then, filling the air with dread, the whispers morphed into one chilling voice. You can't escape, you belong to us now. The shadows converged, swirling ferociously, a vortex vowing to consume their essence. But Sarah couldn't let that happen. With a guttural scream, she lunged, pulling Jake behind her. The exit was close now, tantalizingly just ahead, a beacon urging her on. As she reached for the light, everything felt suspended in that moment, suspended between fear and the promise of freedom. She felt the shadows claw at her, desperate to drag her back, but the light. Mom, no! Jake screamed as she plunged toward the sign. Desperation ignited in her chest. In a flicker, the darkness lunged forward, wrapping itself around her like a shroud. She felt the warmth of Jake slipping away, and with a surge of energy born from sheer instinct, she twisted to grip his arm. They dove into the pulsating light together, but instead of an escape, the world around them shattered. The exit disintegrated into a burst of blinding white, and for a moment, she thought it might consume them, and then they were falling, plummeting into an unknown void, screams caught in their throats. The shadows roared in fury, a tsunami of rage that echoed through the endless darkness. Sarah clung to Jake, closing her eyes against the overwhelming terror as everything around them fell silent. Just when she thought the void would swallow them whole, a piercing voice cut through the silence sharp as knife. The real game begins now. What had she awakened? What awaited them in the depths of despair? They landed with a bone-rattling thud. Sarah gasped, eyes wide open. They were no longer in the oppressive darkness of the hallway. Instead, they found themselves in a long, narrow corridor lined with flickering fluorescent lights. The hum of electricity buzzed around them like a swarm of angry bees. It was too quiet, unsettlingly quiet, as if the world had been paused. Mom? Jake's small voice broke the silence, trembling like a leaf in the wind. She could hardly recognize her own heartbeat, thumping wildly against her chest, as they slowly rose to their feet. The weight of the shadows felt strangely absent, but dread lingered like fog in the air. Stay close, she murmured, scanning the eerie hallway. The walls were painted an unsettling shade of green, stained and peeling, and the floor was littered with discarded wrappers and broken promises. It seemed like a forgotten part of some twisted reality, a place where hope went to die. They moved forward, each step echoing in the empty space. Do you think we're safe? Jake asked, his eyes darting around. Right now, we just need to keep moving. We'll find a way out, Sarah declared, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Her grip on Jake's hand tightened as they approached a door at the far end of the corridor, its surface covered in scratches as if it had resisted years of attempts to be opened. Suddenly, a loud bang echoed behind them, sending a jolt of terror surging through Sarah. She turned back, heart racing as the fluorescent lights flickered wildly. Run! She shouted, pulling Jake with her. They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline fueling their escape, but the air grew thicker with each step. Shadows danced more fervently at the edges of her vision, mocking her as they beckoned from unseen corners. The pounding of her heart drowned out any other sound, thumping like a war drum. Mom, please! Jake cried, stumbling slightly as Sarah ushered him forward. His face was pale, tears glistening in his wide eyes. What is happening? She gasped, desperately searching for anything that resembled safety. We can't keep running. Jake sobbed, his breaths quickening. What if they get us? Jake, focus. She urged, panic rising in her throat, choking her resolve. Stay with me. We'll face whatever comes. The door loomed closer now, an exit from this nightmare. Almost there. Just a few more steps. She could feel an unbearable weight pressing down, as if the shadows were breathing down her neck, hungry and relentless, but as they reached the door, it suddenly shuddered and twisted grotesquely on its hinges, revealing a dark void behind it. The room within beckoned them, pulsing with an eerie heartbeat that synchronized with her own. Mom, don't! Jake cried, pulling back, but the moment hung impossibly thick in the air. It was a choice she hadn't expected to make. A rush of wind howled from the void, thick with whispers that crawled under her skin. Familiar voices spilled forth, all overlapping, echoing memories long buried. Sarah, help us, Mom. Jake's innocence, challenged by the terror still clawing at their heels, pulled at her heart. But she felt more than just fear. There was a longing, a call from the void, reminding her of burdens she had buried deep. What did they want from her? What secrets lay in this sinister room? With her heart racing, she turned to Jake. We have to go in. We need to know. As they stepped toward the door, the whispers morphed into howls, an angry chorus demanding she stop, demanding she pay. The moment they crossed the threshold, everything shifted. The floor dropped beneath them, and they were engulfed in darkness again, plummeting, but this time toward something ancient and powerful. Mom! Jake screamed, clutching her as she screamed back, error wrapping its icy fingers around her heart. Would they ever find the light again? Or had they just opened the door to something far worse? As their screams filled the void, Sarah could only wonder what awaited them in the depths of despair, what secrets were entwined with their very souls. The darkness laughed. The void enveloped them, thick and suffocating. Sarah couldn't see her hands in front of her face, but she felt Jake's small form pressed tightly against her, his body trembling. They had been pulled into a space where time and reality didn't seem to exist. The darkness bubbled around them like a living entity, vibrant with menace. A sudden chill swept through, wrapping around them like icy fingers. Mom, I can't breathe. Jake gasped, his breath hitching in his throat. She tightened her hold on him, feeling the way her skin prickled with a rising sense of dread. Each heartbeat echoed louder, drowned by an otherworldly whisper that echoed all around them. It felt as though the darkness itself was taunting them, feeding off their fear. Just hold on, Jake. Sarah shouted, her voice cracking, as she forced her instincts to override the panic threatening to swallow her whole. We need to find a way out. An unsteady floor appeared beneath her feet, and they crashed down onto a cold, hard surface. The sensation was jarring, everything was wrong. The air didn't smell like dust, it smelt like decay, as if they had landed in the aftermath of forgotten horrors. Mom! Jake's voice was barely a whisper now. She could feel the terror saturating him, and it ignited her own fear anew. For a moment, she considered where they were. The void wasn't merely darkness, it felt like a threshold, a barrier to something much deeper, much more twisted. Then, a faint light flickered ahead, weak and wavering. It barely illuminated their path, but it was a glimmer of hope. In unison, they moved toward it, each step reverberating ominously in the vast emptiness. The whispers grew louder, turning into anguished voices that clawed at her resolve, warning of dangers that twisted under the surface. Sarah, Sarah, the voices hissed her name, rolling and crashing like waves. Memories brushed against her consciousness, fragments of laughter, cries for help, moments of shame. She shook her head, desperate to silence them, but the more she fought it, the clearer they became. Mom, stop. Jake pulled at her arm, panic escalating in his small voice. They're trying to trick you. We have to go back. She looked down, but darkness swallowed her vision. She couldn't see the boy she was trying to save. The temptation of the light was too strong. With steely determination, she pressed forward, forcing herself to break through the shadows. As they reached the light, its glow solidified into a chilling sight, a long corridor that seemed to pulse with the remorse of the past. Pictures hung crookedly on the walls, flickering visions of the family they once were, moments of joy that now felt like a distant dream. "Is this where we belong?" Jake asked softly, fear gripping his small voice. "No," Sarah breathed, taking a step back, the weight of realization hitting her. "We can't stay here." The corridor felt alive, watching them, waiting. Suddenly, a figure emerged from the shadows, indistinct, yet undeniably present. The coldness around them sharpened into something real, something they could face. Sarah took a step forward, instincts clawing at her to retreat, but she needed to protect Jake. She took a deep breath, ready to confront whatever lay before them, when the figure flickered. It morphed into the faces of people she knew, siblings lost, parents she had fought against, all mingled with shadows in a grotesque dance. They reached out with hands clawing at her sanity, begging for release. "Help us, Sarah!" they cried, and the floor began to tremble beneath her. "Mom!" Jake's voice erupted, filled with urgency. "They're not real. You have to fight." Her heart raced, twisting painfully in her chest. What did these specters want? What sacrifice were they asking for? "Don't let them take you!" he screamed, breaking through the haze. With a surge of clarity, Sarah pushed past the spectral figures, grabbing Jake's hand tightly, ignoring the despair-driven voices. They needed to escape. As they slammed against the corridor's far wall, the haunting whispers transformed into guttural laughter, echoing endlessly. The shadows receded, revealing another door, this one sealed tight, a shimmer of light barely visible beneath it. But it beckoned, stirring long-buried hope within her. "Mom, what if it's a trap?" Jake's voice quivered. But she had no choice. They were trapped in a web thicker than fear, woven with torment. Her spirit ignited with defiance. "There's no going back," she whispered, inching closer to the light. As she reached for the handle, a deafening roar erupted from behind them, sending tremors through the air. The darkness quaked violently, and in a single breath, time seemed to freeze. Would they have the strength to break the cycle, or were they destined to replay the same horrors? With a final flick of her wrist on the handle, the door creaked open, revealing an unknown abyss beyond. "Mom!" Jake whined, panic surging anew. "What waits through here?" the air whispered. What awaited them in that light? Had they truly escaped the terror, or was this just the beginning of a darker nightmare? The door creaked open with a hesitant sigh, inviting Sarah and Jake into the glaring light that swirled into a storm of color around them. They stepped forward, armor-clad with fear, but driven by an instinctive pull toward safety. This was it. The end or a new beginning. As they crossed the threshold, they found themselves standing in an empty parking lot under a bright, uninterrupted night sky filled with stars. The air felt alive, charged with energy and warmth. Sarah blinked into the brightness, her heart swelling with hope, but there was an unsettling quiet that sent threads of apprehension tightening in her chest. "Mom?" Jake's voice was small, echoing off the surrounding stillness. The shadows had been replaced by clarity, but it felt too peaceful, almost surreal. "Jake, we made it," she whispered, exhaling the weight of dread that had clung to them like a shadow. Relief washed over her as she pulled him close, feeling his heartbeat against her, grounding her amid the uncertainty. They stepped further into the parking lot. The familiar fluorescent light of the 7-Eleven glowed warmly to their left, now reassuring rather than menacing. The building stood solid, devoid of shadows, a remnant of the horror they had endured. Just a moment's reprieve, but Sarah wouldn't let her guard down. A sudden rumbling sound echoed from the shadows at the street's edge, rattling the stillness. She turned quickly, her heart thundering as she clutched Jake closer. But the moment passed, and there was only silence again, inviting and unsettling. "Mom, are we safe?" Jake asked, his wide eyes peering into the darkness lurking just beyond the light's embrace. A lump formed in Sarah's throat. We will be, honey. But would they ever be free of the monstrosities that had haunted them? Would those shadows linger, pushed just outside where they could not see? As if responding to her thoughts, a gust of wind rushed at them, carrying an echo of laughter that licked at the edges of her sanity. The thought of Eric washed over her, a chilling reminder that evil seldom dissipated entirely. "Let us head inside," she said, desperately wanting the sense of familiarity of the store. They walked hand in hand towards the entrance, every step feeling both heavy and light as they sought refuge. The door swung open easily, and they stepped inside. It truly appeared ordinary, shelves lined with snacks, soda fountains bubbling merrily, and the familiar hum of the lights overhead. But Sarah kept her senses attuned, waiting for the darkness to creep back. "Mom, can I get a drink?" Jake's innocence radiated, reminding her of the life they had shared before the shadows descended. "Of course," she replied, attempting to sound calm, but trepidation lingered behind her smile. She allowed him to wander toward the drink cooler as she maintained a watchful eye. Just then, the door chimed behind them, and in walked a customer, a figure she immediately recognized. Eric stepped inside, that too friendly smile plastered across his face. The tension hit her like a slap. His presence wrapped around the familiar space like a fog, and bile rose in her throat. "Sarah!" he exclaimed, voice dripping with feigned cheer. "It's great to see you. How's Jake?" Her pulse raced, her heart echoing the horrors of the past. "What do you want?" she demanded, stepping protectively in front of Jake, her resolve hardening. "What do you mean?" His grin widened, but there was something there, something lurking beneath the surface, a predator masking itself in jester's clothing. "Stay away from us!" Sarah shouted, the poise of her fighting spirit surfacing like an unstoppable tide. If he thought he could waltz back into their lives, he was sorely mistaken. Eric raised his hands in mock surrender, though his eyes glinted with mischief. "I just wanted to stop by and check up on my favorite neighbors." Jake's small figure shifted behind her, the innocence still clinging to him, but flickering with uncertainty. She steadied herself, breathing deeply against the tension that threatened to erupt. "Leave us alone," she hissed. Self-assured and protective, a barrier against the darkness that threatened to invade. "But why would I? You have such an interesting story to tell." He laughed again, his voice reverberating against the store walls, and the light above seemed to flicker ominously. "No, Eric. We're better off without your twisted games. I'm not doing this again." Her voice quivered, rage mingling with fear. His grin faltered, replaced by a slight twitch of annoyance. "You don't know what you're missing. You could have everything." "Everything?" she scoffed. "The only thing I want is for you to vanish, to let my son live free from your darkness." The air thickened with tension, shadows creeping at the corners, and confusion danced in Jake's eyes as he clung to her leg, sensing the storm brewing. Time moved slowly as Sarah dared to challenge those creeping shadows. "We're free, and we're closing that chapter for good." Then with a swift movements echoing the raw strength born of fear and love, she sprang toward the emergency exit at the rear of the store. "Jake! Come on!" she shouted, yanking him along as they bolted. Behind her, she felt the weight of Eric's menacing gaze, the darkness coiling like a serpent seeking to drip down into light. But they were moving. She could hardly hear their footsteps over her, heart racing in her chest. With a final glance back, the light surged in all its power. Sarah blinked against the brilliance, pushing against thoughts of darkness. "Leave us alone!" she shouted at the shadows, and like a final boundary, they collided against the glowing light of the emergency exit. The door burst open, and they rushed through. The cool night air hit them hard as they stumbled into the parking lot where the stars shone bright against the dark ink of dusk. Freedom, but would it last? They raced through the dark parking lot, the shadows now dissipated, blending into the dim corners of disbelief left behind. Sarah held tightly to Jake's hand, her heart swelling with fierce determination as they disappeared into the welcoming embrace of the night. For now, they were safe. But she knew darkness doesn't just vanish. It waits, lurking, whispering promises of despair in the stillness. As they paced into the distance, Jake turned to her, a bright smile breaking through. "Did we really escape, Mom?" "Together, yes," she reassured, but her voice trembled. Together. No longer were they slaves to the shadows. But the lingering question swirled. The fight against the darkness would always remain. They would never forget. "All we have to do is keep moving forward from here," she whispered, treasuring their bond as a shield against fear. And with that, they walked into the horizon, a new dawn on the horizon, ready to face whatever awaited them in the light of day. But she would remember, she would always fight whatever darkness attempted to claim them. They were free from the chains of fear, and she would make sure it stayed that way. If you ever face your nightmares, remember, there's strength in facing the shadows, and always hope that lies in the bright dawn. Thank you for joining Sarah and Jake on this haunting journey. If you felt the pulse of their story, you need to subscribe now. Smash that like button to let the world know you're a true part of this adventure. Flood the comments section with your theories, fears, and what you think could happen next. You must share this video with at least 5 friends who need to hear this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second. Let's spread this story and keep the light shining together. Keep your hearts brave, folks. See you next time.